So Joy, can I test out the screen sharing? Would you like me to test screen sharing? You're mute.
Yes, you can, Prof.
Okay. Is that visible?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Then we are good to go. Good. Okay, it's already 7. Just when you're letting people in, okay.
People are already in. I think Joy can walk us through.
Shortly, Josephine. I think Rachel is here. Well, we welcome the attendees who have logged in tonight. Tonight, we will be speaking about emotional intelligence and wellness. And our guest speakers and panelists are here with us tonight. And we are excited to share about this topic because it's something very interesting. It's something every employer is looking towards, having employees who are emotionally intelligent rather than just having IQs which are very high. And we look forward to hearing from our speakers tonight. As we await our attendees to log in, we will give a few minutes of introductions. I'll start with our guests who are always here. Tonya Shaw from Karen Surgery. Welcome very much, Tonya. We've got Yvonne Orlando, who's a clinical psychologist. Lisa Hemba, who's the president of Clinical Psychologist Association of Kenya. We've got Dr. Tara, our Vice President, KMA. We've got Dr. Somba Kivungu, who has been very instrumental in the Physician Wellness Committee. We've also got Jackie Yanundo, who's a clinical psychologist. We've got Dr. Kitulu, our past president. We've got on the other end, Milka Bunei, who will be speaking tonight, and we'll hear more about who she is, what she does. We've got Diana Marion. Dr. Diana Marion is all the way from Nanyuki. She's our Assistant Secretary General. I will not introduce our president right now because we will be hearing from him shortly. On the back end, we've got our ICT officer, Peter, who is always with us, ensuring that we stream live and ICT issues are sorted. We've got Edith Woba. Dr. Edith is from Moi Eldoret. We are glad to have you tonight. Professor Lukoya Twoli, well-renowned psychiatrist, and we are glad to have you, and we'll be hearing more from you tonight. Then we have Dr. Haas, who's from Nanyuki, and she has been very instrumental in the Physician Wellness Committee activities, and we are glad to have her here tonight with us, and she'll be speaking later in the evening. We've got Rachel Maina, who's one of our speakers tonight, and we are glad to have you. Shortly, I'll share my screen in terms of the housekeeping issues. So tonight we will be having our emotional intelligence and wellness talk. On your end as attendees, this is how your chat box looked like. You've got a chat panel up there, and so you can click it. Once you click it, you can drop a comment, which is not necessarily a question. And once you drop a comment, we will get back to you, or one of the panelists will get back to you. On the other end, you've got the Q&A section. The Q&A section looks this way. Please input your question that you would want answered. You can either leave your name as it is or send it anonymously. We've got previous webinars are archived within the Facebook page and the KMA resource on the website. You can as well go through them and be able to see what has previously been done on the mental health online webinars. At this juncture, I welcome our president, Dr. Were, to take us through the welcome remarks. Welcome, Dr. Were.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Joy and team. Thank you, Professor Twoli and members of NNAK and all members who have attended this particular webinar. Psychosocial health issues continue to be a big challenge that we all face as healthcare workers. And I'm happy through the Physician Health Committee and our other partner organizations and support from Equity Foundation that we are able to provide this series of webinar under the guidance from our most senior and renowned psychiatrist and Professor Twoli and his team of psychologists. And I hope that at the end of this webinar, we're talking about EQ and wellness, the target to healthcare workers. I hope that we go forth and learn and implement what we have learned from today. So thank you so much for the team that has organized this, and thank you for our partner organizations for continuing to support this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Were. Before we begin, I would also like to thank Dr. Wiruri, who's on the attendee end. Thank you very much for always being here. We'll start off with a poll. We would like to know what, if you have learned have had any sessions about emotional intelligence, and on your end as attendees, please click and vote on this poll. We would like to know how many have had these sessions previously. So as we get the poll going, I would like also to welcome our first speaker tonight, who will be Dr. Kuoba. Dr. Kuoba will tell us a bit about the history and an overview of what emotional intelligence is all about. And then I will hear from the next speakers, and we'll also take a few polls before we move on with the next speaker. So Dr. Kuoba, you can start putting up your slides.
Thank you very much, Joy. I hope you can hear me well. I would like
Yes, let me end
welcome
this
everyone
poll so
who's
that
joined us this evening. We are excited that you keep joining us.
you'll allow me to end the
Joy,
poll. Then
you can hear me fine?
yes, we can hear you well. Let me end the poll so that at least you get to know how many have heard about emotional intelligence and what they can do about it. And then now we can move on with next talk. So the poll ends there.
Okay.
I guess you can see on your end, Edith, the results. Let me share the results. I believe you can all see we have a total of 96% have no information about and have had no lessons or trainings on emotional intelligence before. And when you look on the other end, we have 33% who voted that they have had some training. So over to you, Edith. You've got work to do tonight.
I hope you can see my slides. I realize that there's a confusion. Let me just share again so that we move on. So I hope to be able to get it as I know that most of us have heard about emotional intelligence, but I don't see whether that applies in terms of our own wellness as health workers. And I'll do a brief introduction to what emotional intelligence is. I also talk about the components of emotional intelligence. And most of the time, we think about emotional intelligence in terms of leadership and work, but we also want to ensure that it's related to our wellness. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? And as many of us would know, first of all, we start by defining the word intelligence. Intelligence, from what we may have known from the past, is really the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. And we've always discussed the intelligence quotient, where we rate for in terms of various tests that are done. But most recently has been interest in this aspect of emotional intelligence. And so many of us would also know what emotions are. You still find most of the time based on circumstances, whether you're sad or angry or frustrated or happy. That's your emotion. And so in short, we want to see how those emotions can be, the knowledge of your own emotions can be used to better yourself and interact with other people better, and most importantly, ensure that you remain healthy. And this concept of emotional intelligence was described in the late 1980s by two gentlemen, Peter and John. And how they looked at it, they thought that emotional intelligence is first the ability to perceive emotions. So there are people in life, if you ask them, how do you feel? Sometimes not even able to describe their own emotions, whether happy or sad. So that thing is ability to perceive your own emotions, and then to accept those same emotions. So you feel happy or sad, and to be able to guide how you think about the various aspects of life that you're going through. And the other important is how to ensure that you understand the emotions continuously, and that you use emotions that you have to ensure that you're growing in society, you're growing as a person, you're growing in whatever you do. So in some, we are saying that you must be able to understand what you're feeling, You must be able to understand how those feelings affect you and affect others, and how you can use those emotions to grow. So very important. However, it's important to give credit to this gentleman called Goldman, who, as much as Peter and John discussed the concept of emotional intelligence, it was until later when Goldman published a book on emotional intelligence. And actually, I'm going to spend the next few minutes describing the 5 components that he described about emotional intelligence in general. And the other colleagues are to give various aspects of emotional intelligence and apply in life. So what are these 5 components? The first most important component described is awareness. The ability to recognize and understand your emotions, why you do what you do, why you woke up today late or early, why you went to work yesterday and today you decided to miss. Understand why that is happening to you. It's very, very important. How is that related to how you have been feeling, whether you've been happy or sad or frustrated? How does it contribute to the way you're doing things? Very, very important. And those emotions, when you went to work yesterday or today, or when you related with your family, what was the contribution of your emotions to the interaction you had as you go on with your daily life? Very, very important. How did they affect your children? How did they affect the people you serve? How did they affect the people who are your bosses? Self-awareness is the beginning of emotional intelligence and the first most important component that it starts with. The second other important component is to what we call self-regulation. And what is this about? So we all feel sad, happy, angry, different emotions, and that is normal. Actually, I'd say that it is abnormal to feel the same way every day. As a psychiatrist, when we look at patients, for example, who have schizophrenia, we know that they have inability to express their emotions and to even acknowledge what they feel. So it's actually a disease if you don't experience some emotions. However, it's very important that you are aware that whether you feel sad or happy must not be expressed in a way that hurts others or hurts yourself or hurts your career. So very important to keep check of how your emotions are affecting how we are doing. And we've seen this even at the workplaces where you can be very angry and you vent on someone who is really innocent, or sometimes you just are walking and you hit a cat that was innocently just moving around. Sometimes that is not a cat, really, it's a human being. So self-regulation is ability to suspend judgment. You feel angry, don't have to respond at that time. To delay action, even if you feel like hitting someone because you're very angry, and allow yourself time to understand what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you do next. So self-regulation is the other important component of emotional intelligence. And the third component, according to Goldman, is what we call internal motivation. And it's very, very important that each one of us is able to identify these aspects of emotional intelligence and of their life. Why did you wake today? What keeps you going? And I know many times, especially as workers, it is the salary, sometimes it is the work, exciting, but unfortunately that always does happen. And internal motivation is that inability to say, I will go anyway, even when the salary is not good. I go anyway, work and stuff. Even when, as a matter of fact, I don't like my boss, or we are not interacting very well. A curiosity and desire to learn. How would I better myself so I can move out of this that really probably I don't like very much. So very important that every one of us that we remember that at the end of the day, even all this the salary or the good remark from our bosses or the people we work with, if they were not there, we must always something that keeps us going, because the truth is sometimes there will be nothing to keep you going. And you have to be, it has to come from within you, because otherwise if you always keep looking at the environment, you may not have reason to keep going. And the fourth component of Goldman's idea of emotional intelligence is that each one of us must have the ability to understand the emotions of others. Very, very important that you can recognize, whether it's yourself at home or at work, that you're able to understand what other people are going through, and you're able to treat those people according to what they are going through. And that requires that you're looking out and that you have some concern of some sort, so that you don't just keep saying things like, you find someone is mourning their child and you blurt out something about them that continues to hurt them. So very important that you are able to not necessarily put yourself in the shoes of other people, but recognize that people are going through things and they require support through the things that you do. So the empathy component, and the fifth component is what we call social skills. And what are these? Very, very important. We live in a society. We have different challenges. There are different personalities that we interact with, and sometimes some of them are not very exciting to work with. But unfortunately, we don't always have the options of running away from them. Therefore, it is important all of us are first able to build rapport with the people we interact with, whether or not they are very friendly or they have the opinions that we share, and that when, especially we have different opinions, we must always be open to finding common ground with these people, because we must continue working with them. We must have the capacity to build networks so that we can be growing and learning from other people, and be able to manage relationships. And we've seen a lot of times that why people are depressed or struggling is because they always expect that people, on the other hand, will have the same opinions as them, they will have the same way of things, and they are not able to manage these relationships, and they end up getting very, very frustrated. So very important to keep remember that at the end of the day, if you are not able to relate with people, you will become a very frustrated human being, because no person is going to be an island to live on. And to ask ourselves, why do we need this emotional intelligence and connecting it to wellness? The most important thing to remember is that while you have emotional intelligence, then you're able to communicate better with them, because you're not always communicating emotions, you thought about it. You become anxious and less stressed because you manage how to manage relationships and your own conflicts. Very, very important things to be able to do. You have better relationship with people. And again, this is very, very important, because sometimes we are struggling, we are having a very difficult time in our environments because we are not able to relate with people. Problem solving, people who are emotionally intelligent are likely to be able to solve their problems better, and at the end of the day they become happier and are more successful in life. And I'm sure we are go along today, we are going to learn how to improve our own emotional intelligence, and we are going to be taught about to do self-evaluation, how to observe people, how to react to us. You have made comments sometimes in public or in you interact with people. Did you notice how they reacted? Because how they reacted is communicating about something that's right or wrong with you. The ability to look at our own environment, again, very, very important. It's very important that as we go along, we are able to examine how we react to stressful situations, to be able to take responsibility for our own actions, including just to apologize to people when you notice that you've said something out of your own emotions that didn't go very well. Very important that we are able to take responsibility and to continue examining how we are doing in our workplaces, how that is affecting people. Those are some of the things we are going to be discussing as we go along. So it's important to keep remembering that you will not be well as long as you probably are not able to have some of these aspects of emotional intelligence. So in conclusion, what are we saying? We are saying that it's an awareness of your actions and your feelings, something many of us have always neglected, and how those affect those around us. We must, if we are going to have emotional intelligence, we must cease to be selfish. It's not about us, it's also about other people, and that makes us better people in the society, that we're able to value others regardless of how they are not as educated, quote unquote, as you, to listen to them, because they're too, even the ones who are not as educated as you, or who don't seem to have much to it, could be the cleaner, but that cleaner may the only one who knows where the key to your the safety doors, and that's what might save you. Very important to value others regardless of their position, and to keep remembering that, as we're going to be taught today, that emotional intelligence can be learned, unlike the intelligence quotient, which sometimes there is maybe a bit of learning, but it's difficult. Some of it is difficult to modify. Emotional intelligence can be learned, and each one of us should aim to develop their emotional intelligence, because it's vital for our own mental, physical, and social well-being. And I hope that we are going to be, all of us are going to learn. I'm looking forward to learn from everyone else, so that then the day we can be people who are better and who are able to relate better and we can grow together as healthcare workers. Thank you very much. Back to you, Joy.
Thank you very much, Edith. Very insightful and eye-opening. And for sure, emotional intelligence is very important. It changes our lives in different aspects. And we hope with these presentations, we will come out of here tonight when we are changed. I'll launch another question that we need to, two more questions that we need to answer before we talk to Milka in terms of what perspectives do we expect to see when we are at our workplace, and what angles are we looking at when we talk about emotional intelligence at the workplace. So I launch this poll on your end. Please do vote on your end, and then we'll take a second poll after that. Are you aware what your top 3 strengths and weaknesses are? Yes, no, maybe. Your top 3 strengths and weaknesses, what are they? Are you aware? Is it yes, is it no, or is it maybe? Those on Facebook, sorry, you cannot see these polls on your end, but we do have, we'll pitch them and you can as well answer us on the Facebook Live. Are you aware? What are your top 3 strengths and weaknesses? I see we've got 165 people who have voted out of the 257 who are on the Zoom platform. I'll stop in a few so that we move on to the next poll. If you're yet to vote, I'll give you a few more minutes. Prof is here with us. Thank you very much. And Dr. Kigondu, karibu sana. I see you have arrived. Dr. Patel, thank you. Good evening. You've said a good evening on your end. So I'll end the poll there and I'll launch it. So those are our results. You can see the results on your end, Kuba. Professor Twoli, you can see the results?
Yes, the results are very visible.
Yes, I could see them.
So the number who said yes are 52%, and the number who said no, 13%. Those who said maybe are 34%. We'll move on to the next poll. The next question. And we get to hear about your abilities in terms of teamwork. Do you work well in teams? Because when we look at emotional intelligence, it's all about capabilities. There are many people who say, I am a solo person, I work best alone. Others work best in teams. Others never work at all with a team. So where do you fall? Is it always? Is it sometimes? Is it never? Feel free to answer. These are anonymous polls and they will help us with our discussion as we move forward. Thank you. The votes are coming in. Those on Facebook Live, we are asking, do you work well in teams or do you work well as a solo person, or you usually work alone? Single practice, individually make your own decisions, but we want to hear your team capabilities. So we've got those votes coming in. And I think I'll end that poll there. And then we get to see the results. Thank you very much for taking the poll. That's how we voted. 53% sometimes work in teams, work well with teams, and 47% always work as teams. And then 0% never work as teams. So mine is to ask, we've got our panelist who's Milka Bonet, and she'll be talking a bit about the importance of emotional intelligence at the workplace. I welcome you, Milka Bonet. Milka is a counseling psychologist. Why do we really need emotional intelligence at the workplace? So welcome, Milka.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joy, and everybody. It's a pleasure really to be able to share in this forum and to learn from everyone that's here. I think this is a very interesting topic, and especially to us, the healthcare fraternity. And I think one of the reasons why I just learned that it is important to have a stable, strong emotional intelligence at work is that first, our job is emotionally laden in itself. And it has been recognized from studies all over that it is a job that is related or associated with high levels of stress and burnout. And we are also we are helpers to people who are suffering. They are suffering because of health issues. They are frustrated. They are depressed. Some are anxious, worried because of the perception of the suffering that they are going through. And in that case, it would be good if we are at the end where we are able to support because they look up to us. Besides that, even as a colleague or a worker, we are able to receive and give feedback. When we have a high level of emotional intelligence, we have the ability to receive feedback and to receive it constructively, or even to give constructive feedback to the colleagues. Like, for example, when we are in meetings or when we are interacting in our workplaces. And also when we are at workplace, emotional intelligence helps us to deal with challenges. We have challenges. Every person has, experiences one or the other challenge at workplace or even beyond. And therefore, while at workplace, emotional intelligence is helps us to be able to deal with challenges even with relationships at place of work. We are also able to deal with change, like at the moment when we are dealing with pandemic and the changes associated with this pandemic. So having emotionally stable aspect of life, we're able to deal and even accept the changes as they come. And we are humans, that we also experience problems, or we experience personal issues, while at the same time we are workers. So in this case, having a high EI or emotional intelligence will give us that ability to withstand or to accept the changes that occur. We go through setbacks and failures in life. We go through setbacks and failures in programs that we run. We experience problems here and there, and therefore having high intelligence in emotional, or being able to accept or be aware of our emotions, then we are able to deal with this. So that is how it is important to have high IQ at place of work. It has been known that 90% of performers have an above average intelligence. That is not the traditional IQ, but emotional intelligence. And that emotional intelligence is also responsible for 58% of job performance. And even those managers, managers that are hiring employees, they say that they consider emotional intelligence more than IQ when they are actually deciding on who to give the job, because they have discovered how important this is at the place of work. So research has demonstrated that 75% of hiring managers value employees with high emotional intelligence. So looking at all these, and we have all these facets that the first presenter has talked about, being able to perceive emotions, being able to understand emotions, being able to use these same emotions to your advantage and to the advantage of the organization, and also manage the same emotions, because emotions is the beauty of life. We have emotions, whether we like it or not, and it could be varied, ranging from the positive emotions to the negative emotions. So how do we handle all of this? Because it has been known even that extreme, positive emotions sometimes put someone out of balance. So it is important that someone is when you have emotional intelligence that is balanced, then you are able to balance between whatever negativity that could arise or any negative or any positive thing. In addition to this is that emotional intelligence has some dynamics, personal dynamics as well as social, in the sense that it affects our intrapersonal life as well as interpersonal relationships. Like emotions, when you are self-aware, then you are able to understand other people well. You are able to understand colleagues in a better way when you also are aware of your own emotions. If you are having a good, a self-awareness, then this leads to some self-management. So at places of work where we have challenges and you are dealing with people who are capable of having, skills of self-management, then their relationships are balanced. And then this leads to eventually to increased performance, both at a personal level as well as, as a team. It eventually leads to team performance or, program performance or organizational performance. And so there's an importance, there are so many importances of, or good things, outcomes of having a well-balanced emotional intelligence or increased emotional intelligence. One of these is increased leadership performance, which I know Professor Atwoli will be talking about, increased leadership ability. Because we are leaders at a personal level, but also leaders at different other levels, like departmental or other places of work. We have increased team performance. When you are more aware of yourself, when you are more in control, in charge of your emotions, when you are aware of what's happening to you, you make a better teammate. Also, good emotional intelligence improves decision making. And we make decisions every day, morning to evening, or every day of work. It also increases, or rather helps us to manage or decrease occupational stress. When we have a high emotional intelligence, we are able to manage stress better. And also, because this IE has been known to even be supportive of staff retainment. So it reduces staff turnover at places of work. And finally, I think what I have here is that it increases personal well-being, as our speaker has said. You become more happier, more at peace, more, you relate well, and therefore you are happier. So then, therefore, it is very important to focus on this, to focus on these assets, or to focus on improving your IQ, IE. EI, for example, you focus on self-regulation. How well are you in touch with your emotions? And are you able to say no, for example, to negativity? Are you able to stop the thoughts that send you to hating others or relating with others in a more critical manner? Are you more self-aware of yourself? What happens? What ticks you up? What gives you joy? Are you motivated, and what kind of motivation do you have? Is it an internal motivation? Because most of those who have a high emotional intelligence are motivated from within. They are able to identify their personal goals and able, therefore, to meet those, to achieve their personal goals. But in the end, also, organizational goals could be achieved. And then focusing on empathy, because a well-related person is able to empathize with others, is able to understand others when they are feeling, how they are feeling, and such like things. So the way to improve emotions at places of work is, for example, through active listening, through, not overreacting or stop reacting, staying well self-motivated, and, ensuring that you are more, at empathy level rather than sympathizing or such. So I think I want to stop there because I know there is time for interaction. But to
Thank
say
you,
that,
Milka.
emotions are very important at places of work. One more thing is that it is the beauty of life. It's the beauty of everyday work. Thank you.
Thank you, Milka. And thank you very much for highlighting that in terms of the workplace. The workplace is a place where, yes, sometimes emotions can be elevated and the workspace becomes very uncomfortable. And with that, still, I know there are those who have asked, yes, the polls are too much, but just to ask, do you or your co-workers think you match an emotion to a situation? Before Prof comes in and tells us more about how to harness better emotional relationships when we are dealing with colleagues at the workplace. So do you or your co-worker think you match an emotion to a situation to keep a situation on track instead of aggravating it? Because we've had colleagues, yes, you find you came into work, all of you happy, and suddenly things escalate at the workplace and no one wants to reason, no one wants to work with you. And even in terms of leadership, wherever you may take up a leadership position, you find things get very inflammatory and you cannot work as a team. So have these situations been there? That's the only thing we would want to know, and then move on to hear from Prof. Atuoli in terms of empathy and empathetic leadership, because we need to harness that as we move on. And some of these things, I think, are the things that even tickle us and end up resulting in poor leadership, end up resulting in poor work relationships. So I'll end the poll there, and Prof, I think with that shared, we've got 80% who say sometimes their co-workers have said their emotions don't match the situation, and 20% say always, 1% say never. So I'll stop sharing and welcome you, Prof. Atuoli, to take us through empathy and empathetic leadership.
Okay. So, can you hear me?
We can see, okay, sorry, I think we lost the presentation. Yep. But we can't hear you, Prof.
You can hear me as well.
Now we can
okay,
hear
very
you.
good. So we've heard a lot about emotional intelligence and how it affects you at the workplace and how it affects your relationships with other people. You can't hear me? Oh,
no,
okay.
I can hear now.
Sorry. You can hear me now?
Yes.
This is Zoom. Talked a lot about emotional intelligence. That's fine. So I wanted to take the lessons that we have learned from the presentation on emotional intelligence and do what you might call applied emotional intelligence, how we can apply emotional intelligence in leadership. And I want to take, and this is what organizations hope that they can get a leader. And as we do this, then we're looking for a leader who has a vision. You can see that at the bottom left of this cycle. The mission of the organization.
Prof, let me interrupt you a bit.
We call charismatic leadership as part of the, on the top left, then
Prof.
Is a leader who
Prof.
intellectually stimulates the followers, helps them to think. Okay. Yes, Joy. Yes. Oh, so you can hear me, Joy.
Hello, Prof.
But you,
Yes.
this is
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
You keep breaking up, however.
Okay, so it means that my network is coming on. All right. Probably be as fast as possible so that I think the message can go through clearly, and it's not very long. This is the challenges of Zooming in this era. So let me just put up the presentation. Okay. So this is where I had reached. I hope that remains clear that these are the 4 paradigms of transformational leadership, and it's the only slide that I was going to talk about leadership, and then I move on to how these with what we have had today about transformation. We have talked about adaptive leadership, and then develops others by exercising individualized consideration. So you offer personal, but you can see the presentation. I don't know how that is happening. All right. Okay. Picking up a lot of bandwidth. Can you hear me now? So I'll just go on without the slides.
Yes, I think it's more clear without the presentation.
Right. Very good. So the slide that I had put up then talked about transformational leadership, and individualized consideration is about as a leader. You develop other leaders as a leader, or idealized influence. Where? Yeah. So I'm not going to do the presentation. I'll share the slides afterwards. And so idealized influence is the 4th component of leadership. This particular idea about transformational leadership and the presentation on emotional intelligence is the connection or the conjunction between leadership and emotional intelligence at the point of empathy. And so empathy becomes an important in the context of leadership. And this is extremely important in my view. It is important for a leader to have the ability to put themselves in their followers' shoes when they are making decisions, so that you know about the impact of any decision you make on the physical and emotional health of the people that you lead. This is one of the manifestations of empathy. How would I feel as an individual yourself before you make a decision affecting? There's a triad that influences how we live our lives, influence how we feel, our feelings, and these feelings are what drive our actions. And then whatever we do comes back in a feedback loop to influence how we think going forward. Each of these influences others, and how you make people feel influences how they think, and this further influences how they feel and influence on how other people are going to behave. And we can think about empathy as having three different types of empathy. The first one is cognitive empathy, where you understand how other people think and feel at a conceptual level. So you can tell people, I know what you're going through, I understand what you're going through at a cognitive level. That's often viewed as a surface kind of empathy that you probably have to express for people to know that you are feeling it. Then there is emotional empathy, and this is connecting with the feelings of another person at an emotional level. It goes beyond just understanding how they feel and goes towards identifying and connecting with the feelings of these people at an emotional level. And the third component is compassion. The third type of empathy goes further than cognitive, goes further than the emotional, and goes beyond simply understanding, and it means another person's experience. Because you come to them as a fellow human being and you share their experience. When they're going through pain, you share their pain. And that is perhaps the ultimate type of empathy that one would benefit from if they're going through a difficult time. What are the elements of empathy then? There are four of those. And one is seeing yourself in the world of another. That is putting yourself in their shoes. The second element is understanding their feelings after putting yourself in their shoes. The third is accepting them non-judgmentally, so that you don't judge people by virtue of the fact that they're different from you or that they're not you. You accept them non-judgmentally. And finally, the ability to communicate that understanding. So you have to see yourself in their shoes, get into an emotional connection, accept them as fellow human beings non-judgmentally, and finally, communicate your understanding of what they're going through. And those would be the elements of empathy. So that empathy exists on a as well. And at the very bottom of that spectrum, and I'll send out this slide, at the very bottom of that spectrum is pity, where you say, I feel sorry for you. Well, so that's it. You feel sorry for someone and you move on. And it doesn't do much for the person or for what they're going through. The second level then is sympathy, which is more, I feel for you. You know, you're going through such a difficult time. You know, I'm not only sorry for you, but I feel for you. I'm still not emotionally connected, but I feel, I understand what you're going through. Then there is empathy itself, which is I feel with you. You start identifying with the emotional tone of the individual that you're working with. And compassion comes at the top of this hierarchy with I am moved by you. Because emotions move people. Emotions make people act in a certain way. So if you have identified with the emotion of this person and are feeling the same way, it will manifest in the action that you take. And that is where we say, I am moved by you. Why is empathy? 82% of employees say empathy is undervalued, especially among the leaders, especially among those who employ them. 96% of employees say it is important that a company, people who have a leader, say it is important that the leader shows empathy. And that most leaders undervalue empathy. Performance driver. As we have seen, emotions drive behavior. And if you're empathetic, then you will drive performance because people feel a kinship and are able to work with you towards a common goal. On the other hand, send more earnings that companies that not have high empathy scores. So if you're an organization that is completely unempathetic, then your performance will be 50% less than it would workers. And finally, only 40% of leaders can be characterized as having strong empathy skills. And yet this empathy, as has been said before by my colleagues, can be learned. You can learn to understand what people are going through. You can teach yourself to place yourself in the place where other people are, and you can teach yourself how to communicate this empathy at the workplace and in the position of leadership. So my parting shot then is that leading with empathy is leading effectively, and it takes emotional intelligence for you to be able to lead with empathy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. And so sorry for the challenges, but I know you'll share with us that presentation. Very, very key. We sometimes don't make out between empathy, pity, and sympathy. And especially at the workplaces, we all want work done, and empathy is something we only give the patients but not co-workers. So yes, this is a big challenge when it comes to leadership, but it's something, yes, you say can be learned. Our next speaker is a clinical psychologist. She will be speaking to us about how we can harness emotional intelligence from the very time you're a child to now adulthood. Maybe for us as adults, we are unsalvageable at this point, but what about that child that you're bringing up? What can you do to train them in order for them to harness emotional intelligence? But for sure, she says we are not unsalvageable. We can be salvaged even in our old age. Before we take her, she would want to ask you this question. And please do take the poll, because it's really important for her to understand, how do you manage difficult relationships? Those are peer-to-peer or personal conversations when you do have any difficult relationship conversation, either peer-to-peer or even at home with your spouses or with your children. How do you manage them? Do you break down and cry? Do you blame your partner? Do you stop talking? Do you have dialogue, or do you fight? Do you stay silent? You know, silence is golden, as we are usually told, but is it really golden? Can it be harmful for our relationships? What about stopping to have some dialogue? Maybe that's a solution. But what about those who fight? So let's hear from you guys and hear how you sort out these relationship difficulties. And then now we invite Rachel Maina, who is a clinical psychologist, to share with us how we can ensure we harness emotional intelligence at the workplace and in our homes, in our many relationships that we end up having. So I'll give a few minutes as Rachel prepares. I know, Rachel, you're on the other end and you're ready to go. As I end this poll. Thank you very much, Prof. We'll be back to you with a lot of questions. I can see them coming into the Q&A section. And please do drop questions, because Prof is raring to go, and the team, they are ready to answer all those questions that are coming in. I'll end the poll there and share the results as we bring in Rachel Maina. Rachel Maina, silence is golden, and you can see it's one of the key things that most people use when there are those difficult relationship conversations. And next came up as dialogue. The next, yes, is still stopping to talk, which is still silence. Then 20% blame their partner, 16% break down and cry, 9% fight. There are very few fighters around, but where I come from, we take the panga and we chop each other, but we are not doing that here. So Rachel, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joy, for that. I was thinking it would be interesting to see how many males versus females answered those questions. Gender comes in whenever we choose how we are going to handle problems. So I think when you ask anyone, they'll tell you, I'm emotionally intelligent in the things that I do, because when you evaluate yourself, you can say like, I'm easy to form friendships with people. I'm likable. I can function in a team. But I want you to ask yourself, as much as you can say that you're emotionally intelligent and you're sensitive, you're likable, are you able to ruffle feathers? Are you able to drive change? Are you able to think outside the box? Are there fears that come in when you probably want to address your boss or your partner who you think probably is more assertive than you? And those are the frameworks of emotional intelligence. And someone who's probably may view themselves as likable, as sensitive, as sociable, but also views that they are unable to ruffle feathers or to speak up, probably in a quorum or with a group of friends. And it can be something as small as maybe you have 5 friends and you want to go out for pizza and the other 4 want to go out for Chinese food. So are you able to talk your way through that? Are you able to be assertive in the situation? So with that, kind of makes some people to be high on emotional intelligence and others not. So what I'm going to take you through is to try and understand yourself in terms of your emotional intelligence, because some of these things, as much as we can be taught right now, it can be acquired. It's important to understand the genesis of it all, like how did I develop, or how do I interact with other people, and what is the genesis, what's the etiology of how I'm interacting with other people, how I'm aware of myself. And one way of knowing the genesis of your emotions and emotions toward others is to explore, first of all, the influences of your family background and upbringing on your own emotional life. And then also you explore how you react to your emotions and emotions of others based on what you have learned from your family. Those two things. Because with EI, it's some people are born in it, like they are born with the natural capacity to develop EI highly, when others people they learn, and most of the time we learn from our social interactions. So depending on your family upbringing, in terms of what they are modeling for positive interaction between people, or was there a lot of negative emotions within families that affects how you interact eventually as an adult with other people. Also, parental reactions to children's emotions and their direct instruction about emotions are very important socializing tools that support the development of EI. So I'm going to look at gender influences, our family, how big the family is influences how your EI is developed, among other things. But the most important thing, since EI is from social interactions when you're a child, is parenting. The kind of parenting that you are brought up in, the kind of forms the kind of EI you have right now. So I need you to take a break and reflect on the kind of parents you had. Were they authoritarian? Were they permissive? Were they authoritative, like a democratic sort of? Because that has an impact on who you are right now in terms of how you understand your own emotions and how you interact with the people around you, including how you interact with your child eventually, how you interact with your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your peers generally. So let me start with the first kind of parent, like the authoritarian parent, who's basically dismissive. These are kind of parents mwenye ukianza kulia atakwambia pole, wacha kulia na utakulia nitakununulia sweetie. So this is a dismissing parent. This is a parent who as a child will perceive, will see that feelings are unimportant and they are not trivial. And this is a parent who disengages from or ignores the child's feelings and just wants the child's negative emotions to disappear very quickly. It can be a child who has just probably their favorite dog or their favorite pet has just died, and tells them like, wacha kulia, ukiacha kulia itakupatia sweetie, and does not concentrate on problem solving with the child and believes that the passage of time will resolve most of the problems. So for now, I just want the child to stop crying. So what does a child learn from these? And probably what have you learned in your past from these? This child gets to learn that feelings are wrong and inappropriate and not valid at all. They may learn that there's something inherently wrong with them being emotional, with them being sad. Probably when they're angry, there is something inherently wrong with them being angry. They may have difficulty regulating their own emotions, or even recognize and dealing with emotions of other people around them. So they learn instead to ignore their feelings, and they don't learn how to lead their emotions, and hence they do not appreciate the joy inherent in being emotional, in being sad. They always feel like, if I'm sad, I'm doing something wrong. If I'm angry, I'm doing something wrong. If probably I'm too happy, like if I laugh too much, you can be in a relationship where someone is telling you, so you may feel like, again, that is something wrong. And these are person who would probably develop a very low EI in terms of social interactions later on in life. Then we have that other authoritarian parent who's disapproving. This is the kind of parent mwenye atakwambia usipoacha kulia tutafika nyumbani na nitakuchapa. This is a parent who will judge, criticize the child's emotional expression, and the child is reprimanded or disciplined or punished for expressing sadness or anger or fear, whichever other kind of emotion they have. So the parent in this case believes expression of negative emotions should be time limited, and believes negative emotions need to be controlled because they reflect a bad characteristics. Like I know in men, we tell them like, men are not supposed to cry. From the time they are children, they are not supposed to cry. So what kind of adult comes out of such a disapproving parent, a parent who probably resort to reprimanding a child who expresses any kind of emotion? This someone who learned that emotional intimacy or the expression of emotions is a high risk proposition. It can lead to humiliation, abandonment, pain, and abuse. So I'm not allowed to show any form of emotion because it can make me be left by other people. It can cause pain. It can be reprimanded for that, or can be stigmatized if I'm a man for that. And because you have bad feelings, you are the problem. The person may come to say that I am the problem, that my sadness is the fly in the ointment, is a bad thing within these things, or the anger is the embarrassment of probably my family members. So when you grow up in such a family, with such a parent, you end up being a kind of person who you do not want to feel any kind of emotions because you think this is going to cause me pain. You find out like these are people probably who will jump out of relationships very fast, especially when they think that this relationship is going to not to work out, and I do not want to experience the hurt of a breakup. So probably even for them themselves, they will circumvent something or try to just make the relationship not work because eventually, it will not work. And because they haven't been taught, or they have come up being brought up, being told that emotions are bad or for any kind of relationship. So that's how you understand yourself. Then we have the permissive parent. And these parents, when the child starts to cry and be, oh, lia kabisa, so baba, lia kabisa, they're just permissive. Let the child cry until like there is no end. And probably after the child stops crying, there's no discussion about the problems. What happens, like, no, something else happens. Like, now, let's watch TV, baby, or let's do something else, there is no confronting. So these are permissive parents who freely accept all emotional expressions from the child, offers comfort to the child experiencing negative feelings, but there's no any guidance on what kind of behavior should result from that. That does not teach the child about the emotions. So what kind of adult will come out of this? This is an adult who will have trouble concentrating or forming friendships and getting along with other people. Because as much as misery loves company, friendships are attracted to things that are fun. But when you have someone who's always emotional, you won't feel attracted to them. So they will have a great problem forming friendships. And they often lack the ability to calm themselves when they are angry or sad or upset. So when they're angry, they just fly off the handle without any kind of remorse whatsoever, because they grew up knowing that you just express emotions without any regard for anyone around them. And when you have a friend who's angry, and who's always off, like on a very high temper all the time, why would you like to form a friendship with that kind of person? And that kind of person will find a problem forming friendships because of that. So then which kind of parenting is good and which kind of parenting results in a very high EI in this day and age, or in a very high EI of an adult like we are right now? So this is an authoritative patient, or authoritative parent, or one who we say like probably is a democratic parent. This is a parent who values the child's negative emotions and as an opportunity for intimacy and an opportunity for parenting. For example, this is a parent when probably a pet dies, and the child is crying over that loss. They will spend time with that child and tolerate the sadness and the crying. In any case, guide the child towards understanding the emotions that they are going through when it comes to relating to death of a pet, probably related to eventual death of someone else that is close to them. Can even do all those things, or probably having a small burial site for the pet that has just died, and just help the child be aware of the kind of emotions that they are having sadness at that time, they're feeling a sense of loss. And it's okay, because now this parent gets to validate, like, it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel angry, it's okay to feel the way you're feeling, because anyone going through what you're going through will most likely experience the same emotions that you experience. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's good to express these emotions. It's good to be aware of these emotions, and this is how probably you deal with it in terms of getting a very good end to it. So this parent does not poke fun or make light of the child's negative feelings. Let's take them, sasa doki mekufa na saa mtu mkubwa akikufa utabehave like that. So it doesn't poke fun at that and does not say how the child should feel. So when this kind of child grows up, these are kind of adults who will learn to trust their feelings and regulate their own emotions. And also these are adults who will be able to solve problems in whichever area they are, whether in the workplace or in leadership, like Prof has talked about. These are kind of person who will be able to solve problems, regulate their own emotions, and trust their feelings in how they won't be second guessing their feelings or looking for probably a kind of approval from other people about whether they should feel this way or not. And this kind of upbringing will result in an individual who has a very high self-awareness, emotional self-awareness, is assertive and empathetic, like Prof has talked about, has very good interpersonal relationships, is flexible, like I told you about the pizza thing, pizza versus Chinese food. Then has impulse controls, the person will be flying off the window all the time. You'll be knowing that some fights you don't pick up and some you do. Is the person who will be able to filter out where do I invest my emotions most and where do I not, and exactly how do I go around it. So he's able to have self-control and have self-regard as well. So this is very important. So parenting, so it's important now you view yourself from that kind of parenting to understand who you are right now. What kind of parents did I have? How does that kind of parenting reflect on my own emotions, the ones that I exude? And how does that kind of parenting of family upbringing reflect on how I interact with other people, or even how well I'm aware of other people's emotions? Because the kind of upbringing you came up with may make you unable to connect with other people because you are not able to recognize their emotions because you weren't brought up in such a scenario. Other things that probably influence how EI develops in children and now eventually to adulthood is among children who grow up in larger families, like probably more than 8, they have very high EI because they are able to know how families interact. They are exposed to so many kind of faces, interactions, and they know how people interact and how exactly to go around it. And people who grow up with probably with 2 parents as well, have very good AI. So children who grow up probably with 1 parent, or probably who grow up in an environment that does not foster that social interactions, like maybe in a foster home, might have a very big problem developing high EI. And something else interesting is that these large families or this kind of social interaction is not just the one that you find like just for a short time with friends, but it's something that is long term. And that's why in a rural setting, compared to an urban setting, someone who comes to a rural setting where there is all these social networks, and the social networks are consistent in terms of values, principles, they tend to have high AI compared to people who grew up in an urban setting where there's not a lot of social interactions. I mean, Ukuni, PS, TV, you know, Facebook, and all these other things, but there's no actual social interaction like you see in a rural setting. So probably if you're a girl looking for a guy, your guy wa mashamba probably might have a very good EI, and I'll let you know why that very high EI is actually good for marital satisfaction. So those are some of the things that you never think about, but those are the things that are pretty important. And also females have been taught to have very high EI compared to males because they think with the right hemisphere of the brain, where a lot of things that regulate emotions, a lot of brain regions that regulate emotions are kept in the right hemisphere. So emotional regulations within that end. So females tend to have a very high AI compared to the males. So those are the kind of things that probably you'd look at. But parenting is very important. It's important you understand yourself, who you are right now compared to the upbringing that you came in. So let me just touch on good joy or marital satisfaction. So I've talked about childhood and now you as an adult. Then how comes and what comes to peer relationships? And in peers, I'm going to delve to the other corner of marital satisfaction because it's very important. As much as you may have peers that you see today, then you see a week from now. When it comes to relationships, this is someone that you stay every day with. So you can't afford to be to have a disagreement today and it lasts a whole week. With a friend, you can have a disagreement today and you see them after a week. So you can decide by then you have already cooled down and now you can resolve. With a sort of a marital relationship, when you have a disagreement today, you can't afford to stay a week being angry at someone. I mean, that will just lead to probably a breakdown that cannot be amended. So the marital satisfaction, first of all, it depends upon your own expectations, your needs and desires when it comes to the marriage. So that's how you know whether you are satisfied or not. Are your expectations for marriage met? Are your needs in marriage met? Are your desires in the marriage met? So EI, in a lot of studies, has been found to be significantly correlated to marital satisfaction. And up to 40.8% of EI is related to marital satisfaction. Like 40.8% who are people who are satisfied in marriage tend to have very high EI. So we talk about all these other things. There is money problems, there is children problems, there are religion problems, all those things that lead to divorce. But someone who has a very high EI can sustain or can actually be happy, can feel that the expectations are met, their needs are met, desires are met within a marriage very highly, and hence that reduces the divorce rate. So some of the aspects within emotional intelligence that are related to satisfaction, and I'll just touch on what my colleagues have talked about. High level of empathy, like Prof has talked about, leads to marital satisfaction. Ability to control yourself, self-awareness and self-monitoring when in a conflict situation leads to high marital satisfaction. Another EI is about motivation, like my counseling colleague has talked about, leads to EI. Also leads to marital satisfaction. Also stress management, which is part of EI, leads to marital satisfaction. Also having problem-solving skills leads to that. And awareness of other emotions, other people's emotions and their needs also leads to marital satisfaction. So those components that my colleagues have spoken about, if you could work on them, if you find yourself, later on we talk about measurements, but if you find that you are deficient in any of those, then you know that it's something that you can work on and it's something that can lead to marital satisfaction once you increase on EI. So an important mantra to always remember is that the road to logos is often paved by pathos. The road to logos is paved by pathos. Logos is reason and pathos is emotion. So in marital relationships, I think most of people want to understand, like when we discuss about family expenses, like this is how much you should put here, this is how much you should bring into the relationship, this is how much you should save up for retirement. But as much as it can seem like a very straightforward, logical conversation, if we don't attend to the pathos part, the emotional part of it, why do I feel like we should invest more in this than in this? Why do I feel this child is a better place to go to this school compared to this school? Then unless we address the emotions, even if we bring so much logic, so much percentages, so much epidemiology things, you still end up with someone who's dissatisfied in that particular relationship. So it's important to pay attention to the emotions that underlie all these things that are coming in. So having some emotional skills like being calm, being able to moderate conflicts, can increase possibility of solving any form of disagreements between the couples over different issues, may it be thankfully with the in-laws, with religion, with the child upbringing, financial problems, or any other home issues. It can help resolve those disagreements. So, and it's important to know that people who are not able to manage their own emotional struggles with their inner conflicts are not able to use their ability efficiently or focus efficiently on something. So it's important to know about the upbringing. The upbringing is very, very important. It's trying to know, why does this person think like this? Why does this person react like this to these other things? And once you understand that, and you bring in what your feelings towards various things within the family or within the marriage, then you'll be able to resolve in a logical way. So pay attention to pathos and you'll get the logos that you want. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Very insightful. And some of these things we wish we knew earlier, and we would have looked at all these caveats earlier. But well, not to say that we are in any issues relationship-wise, but these are things that we need to learn as we advise even the younger ones who are seeking relationships, so that they don't feel like marriage is such a bad institution. It's an institution where they can prepare early as they engage with the person they are with. Thank you very much for sharing the benefits of living in rural places. I'm a person who really loves living in rural areas and really admire the relationships that are built together. So if that, yes, increases emotional intelligence, it's really important for people to share their times with people living in the rural areas, take their children down there, have them integrate with others and build a good relationship. There are a number of questions. Some of them you have answered them. Now this goes back to the panel and the team. Thank you very much for all the work that you have done sharing with us how to harness emotional intelligence. I know we live here when we are different people. There is Wera who has asked, how would you use EI to deal with team members who bring in negative energy or try to cheat or undercut other members of the team? So how would you deal with EI? I pose this to Professor Atwoli to give us an answer on that. And I believe you're seeing it on your end. It's the first question.
Okay, how do you use EQ to deal with team members who bring in negative energy or try to cheat or undercut other members of the team? This is a tough one. I mean, any team you build is likely to have people who are difficult to deal with. And so one of the challenges of building teams is identifying, especially when you have the luxury of picking the team, is identifying team members who believe in the same vision and who are ready to walk in the same direction. This will reduce the risks of people undercutting each other or fighting and so on and so forth. I hope my volume is okay.
Yes. Yes, Prof, we heard you, but we've lost you a bit for a few minutes. Maybe I'll move on to another question and then I will deliberate on that. Yes, we've heard that you need to pick out your team properly.
Okay,
so that,
good.
Yes. There's a question.
If you have the ability to choose your team, then it is important to pick a team that believes in the same vision and believes in the same organization, and that reduces conflict. But inevitably, if you find yourself in a team that you didn't have the luxury of choosing, then inevitably you'll have people you disagree with, you'll have people who have disagreeable behavior. Emotional intelligence means that you keep your eye on the goal and you don't focus too much on the small fights. And you understand that people bring these fights because they have things that they're dealing with, and that their mind tells them that this is a forum where they can manifest those things. Emotional intelligence allows you to understand where they're coming from, and perhaps gives you an opportunity to imagine different ways of dealing with people who are acting out. And perhaps emotional intelligence would help you to slowly guide and mentor those members of your team who are impulsive, who are uncooperative, and who are difficult to deal with. Guide them by example until they reach a place where they can see their own problems as well. So emotional intelligence helps you to deal with people of all kinds when you have it, because it slows you down from reacting, slows you down from making decisions that you may regret in future.
A very interesting question, which I'll pose to Rachel. How do you apply empathy when dealing with patients, relatives, cluster B, personality disorder features? This question has been asked also to Prof, but let me first pose it to Rachel, and Prof will give an insight on that. How do you apply empathy when dealing with patients or relatives with cluster B personality disorder? And this actually brings a lot of conflicts between in-laws and daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws. Rachel?
Okay, thank you. So at the moment where you can be able to converse with someone, so empathy, it's a skill that you can denote in just active listening and the kind of phrases or empathetic phrases that you give back to that particular person. So it's not a very difficult skill, and you don't have to have rocket science to know that to reflect or to be empathetic to someone. Just need to know that people need to be listened to. So it's important to have that time to be able to listen. And listening, when it comes to active listening, it's listening where you're actually looking at the person, you are present, and they can sense that you're present emotionally as much as you're looking at them. And then empathetic statement is just reflecting the content and the emotion that has been said. Like, let's say, okay, I've been in with healthcare providers of late, and someone can tell me like, we don't even receive masks nowadays. I just feel frustrated. I just feel tired working here. And you can reflect back and say that can be a very frustrating situation. That is an empathetic statement that you're reflecting back to this particular person. So it's the same way. You just capture the content of what is being said and try to figure out the emotion behind it. Most of the time, people won't say the emotion. They won't say like, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm frustrated, I'm angry. So it's up to you to be able to denote that from what someone else is saying. And that's how you show empathy to the caregivers.
Yeah,
thank you. Prof?
Thank you, Rachel, for pointing that out. Most people, like children, do not have the language to express their emotions. So most people will not be able to say, I am feeling unhappy or I am extremely elated. Instead, they will show it in their behavior and in the way they speak rather than with the words they say. So once you understand that, then you start reading people's emotions from what they say and how they say it, then you'll be better prepared to deal with them. And then having said that, people with certain personality types are intrinsically difficult to deal with. And recognizing that is the first step in avoiding conflict, because then you will not engage in arguments with them unnecessarily. You will not engage with them in things that might bring out the worst of their personality. So it's good to understand what the personality is and then figure out a workaround that ensures that whatever goal it is you're trying to achieve is achieved. And if it's a patient, ensuring that they get the care they need despite having the personality they have, which you might have difficulties dealing with.
Thank you very much, Prof. I throw this question to Edith Kuoba. Is it acceptable to throw tantrums to your boss or vice versa? I might feel that I have the best EQ and EI but there is that point where the last straw is placed on your back. Is it acceptable to throw tantrums to your boss or vice versa, or even a spouse? It is.
I think when you use the word tantrum, of course, it is a negative view. I think it's okay to feel unhappy with your boss. It's okay to have a different opinion with your boss, but given the position, it is important that now using emotional intelligence, you do what we call self-regulation. What you gain when you speak, when you're emotional, most of the time, the gap increases. The differences in opinion increases. And most of the time you communicate emotionally, then you don't communicate the fact. And actually you lose on your end. But when you have learned in the spirit of emotional intelligence to understand that I feel very angry. So that's the first point. I feel very angry with my boss or with my spouse about what? Then most of the time you are likely to communicate the principle about what I'm unhappy about, and then mostly will come around and get your point to sort problem. The moment you start shouting or drawing tantrum as you call it, because of his position, they want to return your place. Then it becomes a conflict, an argument, and you don't win anything. So I find it very important in the spirit of enhancing our own emotional intelligence, that we all the time recognize it's okay to feel unhappy, it's okay to disagree, but not okay to express that in a way that worsens the problem. And that's why we talked about self-regulation, understanding, feel angry, and delay the need to communicate at that. So it is not okay, and you gain nothing by throwing a tantrum to anyone, leave on your boss.
Thank you very much, Edith.
Back to you.
And one thing I learned is when actually you go for those job interviews, these are things that are asked by employers and interviewers. The HR companies will ask you these questions, and they ask them very tactfully, where you've had your disputes, how you resolved your disputes. So it's really important to harness your EQ and EIs. So in order for you to get that job that you've really been looking forward to, you could be intelligent, but EQ and EI is really important. Thank you so much, Linda Kimuto, who says, wow, very insightful discussion. Sounds like we are on live coaching session. Could the speakers let us know if they offer any coaching or programs on EQ? Rachel Maina, any programs that are offered? Professor Tuoli, anything you know in terms of any coaching sessions that are ongoing in terms of EQ and EI?
There are various programs online that one can sign up for coaching on EQ. But I think the most important thing is, first of all, to go through an assessment. As much as you can realize that there are some areas that you are deficient in when it comes to EI, it's important that you do a proper assessment that is coupled with a very thorough history intake and as well as collaborative history to actually identify what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and then from there you can now sort coaching lessons or modeling lessons or scaffolding with someone so that you can learn what you need to learn. So yeah, and it's very important to go through that. So online you can find so many coaching lessons. For us psychologists here in Kenya, we can offer the assessment for EI and give you a very good report of what are your strengths and deficiencies, and probably channel you to a good program where you can get the coaching from.
So that means if I need assessment, I can get in touch and you can assess me. I can get to know at what level I am in terms of my EQ and work with me.
Yes.
Prof had something to say on that.
No, I agree with Rachel. I think it's just the same way we assess people's personality in order to know where you're good at and where you're not good, so that you make decisions accordingly and don't throw yourself into tasks that you might not be able to accomplish. The same way your emotional intelligence can be assessed, and where you have shortcomings, like maybe you're not as self-aware as you could be, you can be helped to become more self-aware. Where you have difficulties regulating your emotions and your behavior, you can be helped to regulate that. Where you are not empathetic, there are ways of helping you to develop a sense of empathy, and so on and so forth. You can have your social skills enhanced where you have weaknesses in social skills, and so on and so forth. So this can be done and on a one-on-one basis, seeing a clinical psychologist or some psychologists who are interested in this area. They can help you to do the assessment, and they can help you to identify those weaknesses and to work on them.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thanks, Dr. Rico Mwenda, who says, I agree with you. We should have been taught this psychology in primary school during our social studies. And he suggests that these EQ classes be added during the social syllabuses as early as age 10 years. But I think it should start as early as when growing up, just like Rachel said, that as you grow up, how we respond as parents, we should be very meticulous in terms of our responses so that we build better EQs and EIs for our children. Prof, I think we have one question here, which I know you're very passionate about, and most people have asked. When is it intelligent enough to walk away from a leadership role? So I hand this to Prof, and probably you can take us through when should one think about walking out of that.
I think, and the EQ is a good setting for asking this question, because the first thing is self-awareness. You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, you know what you can be successful at, and you know what you cannot be successful at. If you reach a place where you find that your mission in life is not aligned with the position you are in, it is intelligent to leave. But it is obviously intelligent to live intelligently rather than burning all your bridges and destroying relationships. It is important to plan a departure, and the departure means you're going in the direction that you have strengths in, direction where you can achieve more than you would where you are. If you make that judgment, do not hesitate, because in life, you don't yoke yourself to institutions or yoke yourself to situations. You'll find situations and institutions that are aligned with your life goals and that will not be individual, and you get onto that track and you grow. So while the outside, inside, you know exactly where you're going, you're following a path that you have designed yourself because you're self-aware, because you're more likely to be successful. So there's no job that is perfect for everyone. Some jobs might look perfect for you when you get into them, or some leadership positions might look perfect when you get in. And when you're in, you do an assessment and you discover this is not what my life is about. And it's okay to walk out if it is good for your emotional health.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think I will stop there and say, in conclusion, EQ, EI is so important, not just for employment, for social life. I'll hand over to you, Kivungu, shortly. Dr. Somba?
Yeah, he has heard you.
Okay. So not just for your workplace, not just your social life, but in all angles and all aspects of your life. And it is important for us to harness it from early childhood and grow it. And as parents, as co-workers, let's ensure that we have harnessed our EQ and EIs so that we are able to have safer places to work and also have better mental health and wellness as we engage at our workplaces. With that said, I would like to welcome our chair of the committee, Dr. Somba, to say something, and then Dr. Ohas will close this meeting for the evening. Welcome, Dr. Somba.
Thank you, Joy, and good evening, everyone. I think today we have done a lot, and I'm so grateful to the panelists for really giving out the insight to this emotional intelligence. Last week we had a similar topic with a topic of suicide, and I think after this talk today we can know how we can use emotional intelligence to reduce suicide in our workplace or in ourselves, because it has given us a lot of information. I just want to inform everyone that emotional intelligence is very important. I watched a video, which was an interview between Mandela and Coppell, 1992. And actually, I was quite moved by the emotional intelligence that Mandela had. And I would advise people to have a look at that, because in the discussion, they came up to a situation of like the interview was going to continue. But Mandela saw it, and he quickly rectified the situation, and the interview continued. So emotional intelligence are very, very important skills, and actually we should be able to harness all of them so that we can be able to go well in this life. My other question I was going to ask, well, where is it in the head? I mean, we have when you read, you find that emotions actually are in the subconscious mind, and sometimes we behave in such a way that because of the things that are in the subconscious mind, we react without thinking. So I think we should be able to unlearn what you read, what we learned badly, so that we can now be able to harness this. Others, thank you very much for this very, very insightful talk and presentation, and we are grateful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Somba. I think what I will conclude for you on that very insightful observation is that between stimulus and response, between most stimuli and most responses, there is a space in which we can make a decision about how we will react. And that is what all of us can learn, that you don't necessarily have to react automatically for you to pause and make a decision about how you're going to react. And it takes some emotion.
Thank you very much, Prof. I hand over to Dr. Haas, who will take us through the closing session. And thanks to the attendees, and thanks to our panelists for such an awesome evening. Dr. Haas?
Thank you so much, Joy, for the wonderful job. Asante again to our panelists and the participants. Thank you for your questions. And of course, the interaction. Mine is just to mention that we will have a webinar again next week, and the topic of discussion will be Psychological Toolkit for COVID-19 Resilience by Lucy Mukuria. So munakaribishwa wote, hope to see you then. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.